Coming up on today's Locked On Dodgers, a longtime NOS rival is retiring, a potential outfielder the Dodgers can go after this offseason, and an update on Trevor Bauer and his contract. That's what's coming up, so keep it locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. Thank you for making us your first listen every morning. A reminder that we are free and available on all platforms and on YouTube. I'm Vince Samperio, Ravine Fiends. That's Jeff Snider of Baseball Essential. And we're here to talk about the Dodgers a little bit more so than we have been in the last week or so. Although we are going to kick it off talking about a Dodger rival player. And then we'll get into a discussion on Andrew McCutchen and then just a quick update on Trevor Bauer and his contract. But before we get into the Buster Posey talk, who is supposedly supposed to announce his retirement on Thursday, a couple quick notes. Dustin May on his Instagram story posted Edwin Rios swinging the bat off a tee. So that's a good sign at the very least that he can swing a bat. We haven't really had an update on him, and we just expected to be ready for the beginning of next season. But it's good to see some progress there. And then Joe Kelly, there's an article that kind of put him saying that the Dodgers weren't sure if he'd be ready for the 2022 season. His wife posted on her Instagram story and called it fake news, basically. So that's where we're at on Dodgers updates for the offseason, Jeff.
Yeah, that's always fun. Joe Kelly's going to be an interesting situation because the Dodgers have to make a decision pretty soon about whether to exercise his option. So I assume that they know more than us or any reporters what his actual health situation is, and that will inform their decisions. So yeah, the rest is just kind of a sideshow right now, I guess.
Yeah. But the biggest news out of the NOS, out of the baseball world, really was Buster Posey. He didn't announce it, but one of the Giants beat reporters said that he's expected to announce his retirement on Thursday, today. And kind of interesting. He has a $22 million option or one more year left. Either way, he had $22 million to him. Not sure if he's going to reach a settlement with the Giants or what the case is there. But yeah, Jeff, coming off a year where he was pretty good, probably a little bit overblown in terms of like how good he was, I guess, to me, but still very good. One of the top hitting catchers in baseball, an all-star. And now the Dodgers don't have to face him anymore.
Yeah, it was definitely his best season in years for sure. And so it seemed like the season off had done him well health-wise, and he was able to play at a high level the whole season. And, there's a lot to be said for going out on top. I guess he is 35 years old or something like that. He was drafted out of college, so he didn't start his career very young. So even though I think he only ended up, I think he debuted in September of 2009. So basically 12 and a half seasons, 11 and a half really, because since he took 2020 off, it's a very short career, but that's not unheard of for catchers. And, Dodger fans of all people maybe ought to be able to appreciate a guy choosing to go out on top, and he's going to win the Silver Slugger Award for catchers. Probably he's going to win comeback player of the year. Maybe he's probably going to, get some down ballot MVP votes. He had a great season. And, if nothing else, the year off maybe reminded him how much he enjoys being at home, especially with the new babies and everything. So yeah, congrats to Buster Posey on a good career. He's a guy who, even really since Madison Bumgarner left, there aren't any players on the Giants who I really, really don't like. But even at the time when they had Bumgarner and Pablo Sandoval and other guys who I couldn't stand, Buster Posey was always one of those guys who's like, can't even bring myself to dislike this guy. And so I'm kind of glad he's gone because I'd rather be able to, just dislike the Giants.
Yeah, he was just kind of there. He didn't like when he came up to the plate at times. Although toward the end, it was kind of he's either going to get a hit or he's either going to hit into double play, depending if there's a runner on base. So that was usually fun to look forward to. It's hard because you don't really dislike him, But if you ever do talk to a Giants fan, you do get to say that his last at bat in the major leagues was striking out against Kenley Jensen. So, they can hang that on our hat. I guess we can hang that on our head. But yeah, he was just a really good player, and like I said, short career, but just what he got out of that career was, and this is the debate that's been going on about Hall of Fame and everything else. Is just what he packed into that career was, 3-time World Series champion, NL MVP, Rookie of the Year, 2-time Comeback Player of the Year, because I think he already won the one for this year. 7-time All-Star. He was one of the best catchers in baseball, if not the best catcher in baseball, for a majority of his career, at least early on. And then him and the Giants both kind of declined at the same time. Then he came back and showed what he can do this past year. So yeah, props to him, salute to him. And it kind of makes you think a little bit about Clayton Kershaw, not just for the fact that Kershaw is not technically a Dodger right now. Buster Posey is going to retire, but we've talked about Kershaw maybe retiring a little bit early, especially now with another kid on the way, and he already has the 3. I think the way Kershaw went out last year, he wants to come back at least one more year, whatever the case is. Just not looking into his head, but just kind of, you would imagine as a competitor, that's how you want to go out on your own terms. But yeah, it does make you think about Kershaw potentially doing this one day.
Yeah, has that been officially announced that Ellen is pregnant again?
Yeah, I think she posted on
Okay.
Instagram.
Oh, I don't use Instagram. I saw somebody tweet about it the other day, and the only thing I had heard so far about that was you texting me saying,
Yeah.
I just saw Ellen Kershaw and she's definitely pregnant. And that was a month and a half ago or so.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's good to know that that's official. Who knows what's in Clayton Kershaw's mind, but there had been part of me that thought maybe he's going to want to wait until his little boy Cooper is old enough that he will remember having seen dad play in the big leagues. But if they're having another one, it's not like, that resets that clock if that's actually the goal. And so, maybe that's not going to be a consideration. So it'll be really interesting to see. But, it's a little bit seeing a guy like Buster Posey go out, who I was looking by OPS plus. This was his second best season of his career, behind only his MVP season in 2012. Like he was really good. He's going out on top. And so, maybe the fact that Kershaw did end the season injured, spent a lot of time on the injured list throughout the season, and wasn't, at his best, maybe is a motivator for him to come back and try to, at least go out on top more like Posey did. But yeah, I don't know. It's scary to me. I don't like the idea of Clayton Kershaw ever not being a Dodger again.
Yeah, definitely. That's the thought that crossed, but not the thought that you want to have. But yeah, props to Buster Posey. And we're going to finish here. We're going to come back, talk about a potential outfielder that the Dodgers can go after in free agency. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. BetOnline is back and better than ever. They've got a brand new web interface for the start of the basketball season, and it's got more props, more odds, and more lines than ever before. Makes it a lot easier to go put your money down and try to win some money. Baseball's over, but there's plenty of things you can still bet on, especially basketball and football, as BetOnline remains the number one spot for those sports action this season. So head to BetOnline right now, check out their new website, check it all out, and sign up today. And you can get a 50% welcome bonus after your first deposit with the promo code Locked On. Just use promo code Locked On when you sign up. You'll get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit, and you can start putting money down and winning money and, saving up for next year's Dodger season. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we're back, and just want to once again thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. We appreciate it. We are available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Make sure to check us out. Make sure to tell your friends and family. Make sure to spread the word, because the off season's here, and if you need the Dodger fix, we got it covered for you. All right, Jeff, let's cross over into this next thing. So this prompt was kind of kicked off by the fact that the Phillies declined the option on Andrew McCutchen. And, Andrew McCutchen's a fan favorite of sorts, especially for most MLB fans. And we want to talk, does Andrew McCutchen, does he fit anywhere on this Dodger team, or could the Dodgers potentially go after him?
Yeah, it was interesting. After the Phillies announced they wouldn't be exercising their option, he tweeted out that he's far from done. And, McCutchen is my favorite non-Dodger. And I'm a huge Andrew McCutchen fan. I understand. I recognize the limitations in him as a player, and some of it, when the Dodgers signed Albert Pujols, the reason that you and I were surprised about it is because we didn't think that Pujols would be willing and excited to take on the role that the Dodgers had to offer him. And I feel like we're going to be looking at the same kind of thing with Andrew McCutchen, because the fact is, he's made a lot of money in his career. He's made $112 million basically in his career. It was a $15 million option that the Phillies declined with a $3 million buyout. And so, if he's actually looking to make $15-20 million, I don't think the Dodgers are in on it because he is somewhat limited as a player. His defense has definitely gotten worse over the years, and his performance against right-handed pitching has been basically the last 2 seasons. It's been pretty darn bad, and he's always been better against lefties than against righties. But at the time when he was winning the MVP award and all of that, he was still really good against righties. But he hasn't been good against righties. I guess in a small sample size in 2019, he was decent against righties, but that's the only year in the last 6 that he's had an OPS over of at least 800, over about 775 against righties. But the thing that he can still do is against lefties. He actually just had one of his best seasons ever against lefties in 2021, had a 1,027 OPS. He's got a 954 career OPS against lefties and has been good against them pretty much other than 2016, when, if I remember right, that's the year that he wasn't good at anything against anybody. Yeah, that was his one bad season of his career. Other than that, he has been very good against lefties all the time. And so if he was looking to be a, veteran leadership in the clubhouse, hits against lefties, gets an occasional start against lefties, does some pinch hitting against lefties, the Albert Pujols role, except also still has a little bit of speed, can play defense if necessary, all that. I could see the Dodgers having a place for him, especially with the DH most likely coming. And so if they are that concerned about his defense, and I don't think it's terrible, but if they are concerned about it, he can DH against lefties. So it seems to me, and maybe it's wishful thinking because I do like him so much as a person, but it seems like that role of that veteran leader, that he could fill that role. That everything about it from an off-field perspective makes a lot of sense, and it seems like they might be able to make it make sense from an on-field perspective.
Yeah, I mean, immediately you think to the NLCS, and Steven Souza is taking some of the biggest at-bats for the Dodgers just because he bats right-handed and they didn't have anybody else. And you think about, you slide Andrew McCutchen in there, and maybe, a couple of things change or a couple hits end up happening. And I don't know if it changes the series, but it changes at least how many games the series goes at the very least. So, but it's also contingent on him kind of accepting that. And I'm not sure where he's at specifically in terms of, is he prioritizing winning over playing time right now, which you would think maybe so, since he hasn't made the playoffs in a little bit with the Phillies and with the Giants. And I don't know if he made the playoffs in between with anyone else, but he hasn't been in the playoffs in a while. You kind of want to find a team that, you just look at Albert Pujols, and Albert Pujols is, a little more diminished than Andrew McCutchen is in terms of what he can actually do. Pujols could still hit against lefties, but McCutchen could still hit and play some defense, and like I said, still run. So he still provides value above just hitting. But if he kind of reads, it's going to depend on other teams, obviously. But if he kind of reads the tea leaves and it tells him that not anybody's offering me a starting role, then why not go on a team that's good, that's going to be in the postseason and fill a role that especially with the Dodgers. If you go to the Dodgers, you're probably going to get some kind of extended playing time at some point, because just the way it goes with them, there's always somebody injured or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, I'd welcome it. I don't know if he'd welcome it, but there's definitely a role for him to be had with the Dodgers.
Yeah, and comparing him to Pujols, it's also important to mention that when we're just talking about hitting against lefties, which is the one thing that both of them are still pretty good at, McCutchen was almost 100 points higher in OPS in 2021 than Pujols. So, Pujols was good against lefties. He was good against lefties, but a lot of it was compared to how bad he was against righties. And McCutchen was legitimately great against lefties in 2021 and has been very good against them his whole career. So I think he would be a step up in every regard from Albert Pujols in that role, except, it's hard to be a step up in the dugout clubhouse presence than Albert Pujols, but I don't think he'd be a big step back in that regard. I think McCutchen has a lot of that cred, but on the field, I think he would be a step up in pretty much every way from Pujols.
Yeah, probably more of a step to the side just because they have different, styles of how they command a locker room. So probably in that sense, that's
A
what it
lateral
is.
move.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it would work. There's probably a few other players in that would fit that role that we'll probably talk about here in the off season. But this one was, friend of mine because his option was declined. He did tweet out that he's far from done, and we'll see what happens. I know he's better than Adam Jones was, and Adam Jones ended up going overseas to go play. But McCutchen's better. I think he's probably a little bit better at realizing what it is. I don't know if he would want to go play overseas and if he doesn't get a starting role somewhere. I think Adam Jones maybe thought a little bit more highly of himself or just ended up taking the more money over there because veterans in MLB were kind of being frowned upon. I think their value has gone up a little bit just from what we've seen in the past few years, especially with, as we talked about earlier this year, where the divide between AAA and AA is a lot different than it was before. We saw the Dodgers call up 4 or 5 outfielders that were kind of, could have been fringe prospects, and none of them really panned out. None of them really worked out. And, to go out and get a veteran guy that fills that role rather than a cheaper guy that can come up and not hit, then I think a lot of teams are going to go that way as well.
Yeah, and comparison Adam Jones is appropriate. It's also important to remember that Adam Jones at his peak was a very good outfielder. Andrew McCutchen at his peak was a literal MVP. Andrew McCutchen was one of the best players in baseball at one point. Mookie Betts before Mookie Betts was Mookie Betts, and so I think there's some of that street cred there that he would carry that an Adam Jones wouldn't necessarily. One other thought I had just thinking about McCutchen is that there are some definite similarities to AJ Pollock, and a guy in his mid 30s who hits lefties really well and sometimes struggles against righties and used to be really good defensively and now maybe isn't. And so I think I've seen some people suggesting that the Dodgers might look to trade AJ Pollock, maybe sell high on AJ Pollock with it. His relatively low salary, his good performance. He was very good for most of the regular season, and then he did have a pretty decent postseason. I don't think that's necessarily a prerequisite for going after a guy like McCutchen because, the DH spot and, depending on what role McCutchen's looking for. But I do think if the Dodgers were to explore something like a Pollock trade, that opens things up more for McCutchen. So even if it's not necessarily necessary, it might open things up.
Yeah, very possible. All right, we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about the contract situation and Trevor Bauer. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. All right, we're back and want to once again thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. And once again, remind you that we are on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast, and we're free. So, you can't beat free these days. Nothing in life is free, but this podcast is as close to free as you can get, I would say. All right, Jeff. So the one bit of Dodge news we did get was not too surprising to us, but it did seem like some people were a little surprised. Trevor Bauer will not be opting out of his contract with the Dodgers, and will be continue to get what he's due unless he's suspended. And I wasn't surprised at him. I didn't think he was going to turn down all that money, but that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and it's not a question of whether he's suspended; it's for how long. But he basically by opting in, he is due $45 million in 2022. And if he is suspended for less than the full season, there's some portion of that he's going to get. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he is suspended for the whole season. But there was no way that he was ever going to not opt into that contract or opt out of it, however you want to call it. Some people say it's an opt-in, some people say it's an opt-out. So whether he opted in or declined to opt out, doesn't really matter. It's all the same thing. And as of right now, the Dodgers are on the hook for $45 million to Bauer in 2022. And it's up to MLB now to decide how much of that the Dodgers are actually going to pay him. And with the CBA coming up, there's already a lot of uncertainty, and I'm sure that the Dodgers, Andrew Friedman, and the ownership would like to know how much money they're paying Trevor Bauer in 2022, so they could, make some other decisions based on that.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. I'm still of the camp that Trevor Bauer probably won't pitch for the Dodgers again. Whether he gets if he gets suspended for the whole season or whether he gets suspended for 30, whatever the case is. I don't know if the Dodgers are going to keep him around. At this point, I don't think it's worth it. They're going to have to pay him regardless, like I said, unless he gets suspended or unless he gets convicted or something like that, and they can find another clause in there that they can work out of. But for him specifically, yeah, that's just what it comes down to. MLB, I'm not sure what I'm not sure how important they think the Trevor Bauer investigation is. I'm not sure if they're trying to hurry up and figure it out or not, but this was always going to be a formality. He wasn't going to turn down the money. I guess the only way I can see people kind of surprised by it is if they do think, he's not going to pitch for the Dodgers. And, it might take a little bit longer if he's on a team in order to kind of get back whenever he's suspended rather than if he's not. I don't know exactly what his thought process is. But, yeah, he was never going to turn it down because unless he gets suspended or something else criminally happens, he was always going to get that money regardless and probably still find a way to pitch for another team if anybody ever welcomed him back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think I agree with you that he won't pitch for the Dodgers again, regardless of what happens. The MLB's domestic violence policy is pretty clear that the Dodgers aren't allowed to take any action against Bauer because of these charges. And so that's why they didn't release him immediately. Well, part of why. If they release him, they're on the hook for all the money. And by waiting for MLB to suspend him, they get off the hook for some of it. But, say he gets suspended for half the season in 2022. Well, then, in the end of June, when his suspension is up, at that point, yeah, I think the Dodgers probably release him and eat the rest of the contract. Maybe they try to get out of it legally. But more likely, I think they probably just eat it. And at that point, there's a baseball case to be made there because at that point, he hasn't pitched in a year. He was already showing signs of struggling because of the sticky stuff crackdown even before the legal issues. And so the Dodgers can definitely make a case at the end of June of 2022 that, it just doesn't make sense for us to pay him as a baseball player. And at that point, yeah, even though everybody would know this has more to do with Trevor Bauer and his legal issues than anything else, it's not as obvious as if they had just announced the day after he was charged or arrested or the word was leaked or whatever. If they had just announced that they were releasing him, then that would have been a clear violation of the CBA or the domestic violence policy, and releasing him next June would not be a clear violation. And I think the Dodgers could get away with that. And I think that's probably the route they pursue. And knowing that they've probably already made the decision that he's never pitching for them again, I imagine that they are probably leaning on Commissioner Fred Robman pretty hard to say, you know what? We are in favor of the longest suspension you can possibly try to justify. Let Major League Baseball take on that fight as far as, the fight about the suspension, and the Dodgers can just sit back and say, oh, okay. Oh, we don't have to pay him that $45 million. Okay. If you insist, we'll keep that money.
Yeah, there's there hasn't been talk about it in a while. Passan's article a while back had mentioned that they did want to make this maybe the longest suspension, at least a year, maybe more. It's one of those where they probably would even over suspend in order if there's an appeal to kind of scale back. So, maybe it's like a year and a half and then the appeal brings it down to a year, whatever the case is. But this is going to, it's going to affect the Dodgers offseason in the sense, not on the field because like I said, I don't think we're going to see Trevor Bauer pitch for the Dodgers again. But in terms of money wise, the new CBA, that's going to depend, what else happens money wise. But freeing up that money theoretically would allow the Dodgers to spend it on other people. Even though if they really wanted to, they could spend, as we saw this year, they could spend as much as they want on anybody, and it won't really affect them too much. They let the league in attendance again. They added all the things in the postseason where you could go watch at the stadium. They did a lot of different things this year, and It's not going to affect them if they want it to, but if there's a CBA or a new rule or whatever the case is, then that's where it could affect them.
Yeah, and I can see it actually the other way about MLB, how much they choose to suspend him for, because the one thing we know about Trevor Bauer is he's not going to be afraid to fight whatever it is. And if they were to suspend him for a year and a half and he gets it reduced on appeal, unfortunately, that's a victory for him, and that's something that he can then tout, and and he could even try to pursue legal action. They tried to suspend me for a year and a half because they don't like me personally, and even the arbitrator agreed that that was 50% too long. And so I think they're going to have to be really careful about how long they do suspend him for. And what we've seen with a lot of, and almost all of these domestic violence suspensions in the past is MLB works out a deal with the person. We will make this a little bit shorter suspension than we were planning on in exchange for you agreeing not to appeal. It's what we saw with Julio. We've seen it with literally almost every domestic violence suspension has been, we agreed that to suspend him for this reduced amount in exchange for him not appealing and accepting responsibility, blah, 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 blah. I don't see that happening with Trevor Bauer. I don't think Rob Manfred and Trevor Bauer will ever agree on anything. It's really the only thing Trevor Bauer has going for him is that he disagrees with Rob Manfred on everything. But it's yeah, I don't think they're going to play nice, and so Major League Baseball is going to have to be really careful about what they decide, and I think that's part of why this is taking so long.
Yeah, that's probably true too. All right. Well, this is probably the last we'll talk about Trevor Bauer until the investigation comes to a close or if he does anything else. But that's going to do it for today. That's all we had on tap, unless you have anything else you want to add, Jeff.
No, just you mentioned the Dodgers letting people watch postseason games at the stadium. Did you see that the Braves actually had people sitting on the field at Truist Park watching the game on the big screen?
Yeah, I saw that, and there's been teams that have done before, at least sit in the seats, or maybe not the field, but the seats definitely. I think the field was probably because they weren't coming back after that. But I've seen that before, and I had always seen that from other teams and wonder why the Dodgers didn't do it. This year they did it in a slight capacity where you could watch in the center field part, not necessarily sit in the seats. But yeah, it was pretty cool, and it's a different experience. Probably not one I would ever go to just because I'm always watching with like family or I can't be in public settings, but it's still fun for those of you that aren't as stressed out when it comes to playoffs.
Hey, I would love to go with my whole family and sit on the field, on the grass in center field, and watch the game on the big screen. I'm all about that. So make it happen, Dodgers.
Yeah, there we go. All right. That's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back tomorrow. Maybe we'll ask for some questions from you listeners. Maybe we'll do a mailbag episode tomorrow and see what we got. Thank you for making us your first listen every morning. And for your second listen, make sure to check out Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. He brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It's also free and available on all platforms. That's going to do it for us. Make sure to follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Make sure to follow Jeff on Twitter at Snydog. You can follow me at Samperio. You can always get a hold of us through DMs on any of those accounts, or you can leave us a voicemail or send us a text at 323-863-5625, or send us an email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. To your smart device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.